Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Panwo TV and welcome to this Pylon Hoax. It's a video I wasn't planning on making today. I was going to leave it for maybe a week or so. But I thought, Christmas is coming, etc., etc. I need basically to get these videos done because I've got the entire watch party of Silent Night to do, and I want to get that done before Christmas itself. So I'm making it now. So you're getting 2 videos in as many days. Monsieur Ben, with all these videos you are spoiling us. Oh, don't expect it. Don't expect it all the time. You won't get one tomorrow. So yeah, this is Pylon Hoax. Now this is actually connected to a video I made back in 2020 called the jet fuel hoax. Now, I don't know if you remember it, but I sort of made it kind of to have a laugh, but also to demonstrate a point. I wanted to demonstrate a principle. So which meant I decided to investigate something I really didn't think was true. Really, just in a sense to practice my investigation methods, practice my critical thinking skills, and also help you, the viewer, to do the same. So, because I know a lot of people they just laugh at everything to do with this. They say Tartaria, flat Earth, jet fuel hoax. I mean, I know people who will literally block someone on social media the moment they bring up one of these subjects. I'm not the same as that. I'm not like that. When I don't get angry at people for thinking differently to me, even about some of the most extreme things. I still listen to them. I still listen to what they have to say, and if I don't agree at the end of the day, I don't feel any animosity for them for that reason. I don't get annoyed, or I don't want to break contact with them because of their opinions on this particular subject. For that reason, I gave the jet fuel hoax a fair hearing. I mean, the person who made me aware of it was interesting because someone did write to me about this. I wrote an article and made a film. I started off with a Herpanwo Voice article, and I went on to do a Herpanwo TV film, as I've done this time, because this is based on someone's texting me. This is based on an article I wrote on Herpanwo Voice. Although I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in this Herpanwo TV video. I did conclude at the end of the day that I do think jet aircraft do need fuel. That is actually the case. However, I've come across another video. This was actually Lisa on the Cry Freedom show who first brought this subject up. And it's on the same channel. This is a video on the very same channel that brought up the jet fuel hoax. And it's a channel called Space Busters. Now that's the sort of name that will make steam come out of the ears of Jarrah White. But it is primarily promoting a lot of the subjects I've just brought up, which some people just can't abide. But I'm happy to give it a look. And this particular video, I'm going to investigate. And I must say, when I investigated this, when I watched the video and I started looking into it, I still don't think it's true. I mean, I've got no reason to accept it as real. However, I'm finding it a lot harder to dismiss than the jet fuel hoax. I went into this basically looking for a bit of amusement, and to be honest, I investigated the jet fuel hoax because I thought it was quite funny. I thought it was quite quirky and something I did more for entertainment than anything else. This is a bit different. When I watched this video, and I'm going to show this video to you in a moment. I found it a lot more difficult to cast aside than I did the jet fuel hoax. I really, really did. Now I'm just going to show you this. I'm going to show you the video now. Let me just go to display capture. Okay, now this is a transformative work, just to let you know. I'm showing you this video for the purposes of private criticism, research, etc. Free distribution, not for profit. And I'm actually so this is why I'm going to actually go through this entire video and make some all right, and make some comment and make some commentary as I go along. So you can see that. I hope you can. I'll just start it now.
Here in the UK, we use a lot of electricity.
Not just in the UK, but all over the world. Electricity is the central power delivery system of civilization now. It's not a power source, incidentally. Electricity is not a power source in itself. It's a way of delivering energy from the sources of energy to the consumer. So this is it's an important point to realise that.
But it might surprise you where some of it comes from.
So the free energy etheric national grid. Now this is actually called the National Ether Grid. This video. It's on this channel here, Space Busters. You can see here. Have a look through them. I mean, some of you will just go, "Oh my God, that's bloody awful. I don't want to even look at this." But there you go. There's a lot of flat Earth stuff on here. I should warn you. All right, but let's go through this.
There is quite a lot of pushback from people who don't want huge windmills built close to their houses, and quite rightly so.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only an obsolete system of electricity generation, they're very harmful.
They are noisy, ugly, they kill birds by the thousands, and not very effective on days with no wind. And when it's too windy, they have to turn them off so they don't rip themselves apart.
And sometimes UFOs crash into them as well. Remember Lincolnshire?
Another lesser-known fact is that the so-called carbon footprint to make these huge machines is massive, and it's even bigger when they are decommissioned. They last on average about 20 years. They can't burn them because it's too toxic, so they have now resorted to burying them in landfills because it costs too much to break them down. That's not very green, is it?
What are they made of, actually, these things? I mean, it looks like fiberglass or something. I know they're not metal, most of them. They're made out of a light material or something. I don't know, plastic or something like that? I'm not sure. Anyway, carry on.
According to our favourite source of information, the UK's first grid tower was erected in 1928. Its purpose was to transport electricity to the outer reaches of the mainland, supplying its ever-growing population with the power it needed for expansion into the Industrial Revolution. Before the expansion of the national grid, businesses used local coal or gas-fired generators and all manner of contraptions to power their factories.
You know, that's interesting to realise that about I'm going to pause for a moment, because the dawn of the industrial age, of course, led to the arrival of electricity. As you know, I've done several videos now about Tesla, and I've reviewed the films Tesla and the current war and things like that, which explain how in the late 19th century electricity became widely used, and there was this battle between Westinghouse and Edison about which kind of current to use, and Tesla was involved in that. He and Westinghouse won at the end of the day with their own system of alternating current, which is used today. However, of course, we have now this situation where we have these grid towers, what we call pylons today, took over from the previous system of private generators and small local power generation systems, because it in fact makes more sense, actually, I would say, for the electricity you use to be generated as close as possible to where you need it. Therefore, the actual wires that deliver the electricity, the circuit which powers whatever you want powered, is as small as possible, because then you lose less power to resistance. A small circuit is more efficient than a large circuit. And I know probably several engineers will say, no, but it has to be different. It has to be differently because of that or something. Well, go ahead. I'm going to actually appeal for more information as we go through this particular video. So, but that changed, of course. It evolved into what we see today. This system with a national grid that is basically this is a huge network of electrical circuits that cover the entire British mainland, and indeed sometimes they power other islands as well. And this nationwide power circuit, this network, is charged at various points by large centralized power stations with the ability to create an enormous load, powered by coal, nuclear fission, etc., etc. And I'm not going to repeat what I said about free energy before regarding these power stations. I've covered that in other videos, my nuclear fusion video and things like this. I'll put a link in the description box to my portal on free energy. That'll be enough for you, won't you? That's the thing. That'll be enough. Just everything you need is on that one portal.
So the emergence of electricity delivered to your doorstep, so to speak, was hugely popular. We have been led to believe that these high-tension power lines transport electricity from one place to another. This is true, but the thousands...
I'd assume that was right, yeah, because we have local power station, Didcot, our local power station at Didcot, which I've showed you. I've been there. I've done several videos there. There's pylons come out of that, and you have substations nearby, and they step down the voltage, and then you end up with like local supplies.
Another. This is true, but the thousands of miles of cable have another lesser known purpose, and that purpose could change the way you think about power generation. And it also begs the question, why the hell are they keeping this information from us?
Oh well, it's obvious, isn't it? Money, control. It's the old free energy cover-up business, isn't it? There's people making a lot of money off it. It's also used. It's essential. I'd say it's absolutely fundamental to the New World Order and the system we have today. In fact, I've often said, and indeed I explore this in my novel Roswell Rising, a Novel of Disclosure, and its 2 sequels, available at all good bookshops now, price £10. As I've explained, it's necessary. There's that conversation between 2 of the characters, where they're sitting down, and one is saying, well, when are we going to tell people about all this energy you've got, this free energy system? When are you going to tell them? And the other character says, never. We never tell the people. And he goes on this long explanation, explaining to the other character the facts of life. If you're in control of this world and you want to stay in control of it, you need scarcity to create dependency for the purposes of control. So it is, on one level, the lower level, the outer party of the oil industry and things like that, it's about money. But at a higher level, it's about political control. I'll continue. Whoops.
The word air is derived from the Latin word air, or ether. The ether is the air that we breathe, but apart from keeping us all alive...
All right, the ether actually has a different definition. It's supposedly the medium through which electromagnetic radiation travels, which, according to Albert Einstein, doesn't exist. However, not many people know the Michelson-Morley experiment has been repeated and got different results.
It has another little-known property that you probably didn't realise. The ether is electric.
There's Tesla there, see?
Our whole existence depends on electricity, but that topic is for another video. The ether carries a charge. From the ground upwards, it increases by 100 volts for every metre in height. That is cumulative if grounded. This energy can be harvested from the air, ether, by hanging very long wires high up on pylons stretching right across the country.
Oh, I see. So that's the purpose of these wires on pylons, is it?
Have you ever wondered why these thousands of miles of cables are supported on huge, mega expensive and very ugly pylons, when it would have been much easier and much cheaper to run these cables under the ground? Or how about under the existing roads?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't think the deep state care about things being ugly. I mean, they give us ugly things all the time, don't they? Look at all that art, that weird folk art they keep putting up on street corners, which scare the hell out of people. But that's a good point. I mean, according to the official story, it's insulation. If they ran them underground or at ground level, they would have to insulate them, and that's too expensive. Putting them up in the air like that, they don't have to insulate the wires because they're too high up. No one can touch them. That's the official story, but let them continue.
Nope. We apparently prefer seeing these massive monstrosities winding their way across the otherwise beautiful landscape. And I don't know about you guys, but I've never, in my 50 years of driving all over the country, ever seen a new line of pylons being erected. All services are now buried under the extensive network of roads.
That's interesting, that. Excuse me, that's true, isn't it? They're there. I mean, I've seen maintenance men go up them. I've seen them I sometimes see engineers climbing up them, and obviously they must get the rust off them and things like that. These steel lattice towers, they kind of just... They're just there, aren't they? Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting point, actually.
A quick search for your local area on Google Earth will show you power lines and pylons. If you try following some of the lines, you will find that some of them start and finish at the same substation. So they're transporting electricity back to where it came from.
What?
I think not. No, This network of
Let me
high...
just test that. I'm just gonna. Hey, can you see that? Oh, sorry. I didn't show you. Well, basically, I didn't show you that bit because I didn't have on display capture. Basically, all he did was show that how he claims he showed some aerial views of pylons. I'm just going to show you. I'm now going to just go to Google Earth and test what he's just said. Here we go. Right. Google Maps. I'll use Google Maps. Okay, so let's go to my own city, Oxford, and see what's there. And I'll go and have a look at some pylons that I know exist because I see them when I quite regularly because I often pass that way. So they're on the southern bypass area. Here we go. Okay, they're somewhere in the southern bypass. Oh, I'll just go to display capture now. Okay, so this is the southern outskirts of Oxford here. This is the eastern bypass. This is the River Thames, which we call Isis, and there we see suddenly there are some pylons. So where do they come from? Where do they come? Let's just follow them this way. They go right across. This is the southern bypass. Yeah, here we go. So they go across here. They go up here. Someone's texting me. Okay, texting. Oops. They go up here. What's this? Another one here? Oh, I think that's a substation. There's no pylon. There's no wires leading off from it. I think this is here as a substation. Let's see if there's any ground views. Oh, there's one over here. Let's find the nearest ground view. Let's have a look. I can't actually see from there. Hang on. Facing the right way. No, there's a tree in the way. Let's see if I can see from this side. Oh, come on. There's not much in the way of ground views here. There's nothing on the... That's the railway there. Just need to look this way. Again. It's all blocked off. Must be a conspiracy. Oh, let's follow it the other way. Hang on. Let's go follow it the other way. There we are. It's just there. That's where we started. So let's follow this pylon south. Now it's heading southwards. Now that leads me to believe it goes all the way south. I've seen this row of pylons, and it's a very long, straight one. If it's going southwards, then it's probably heading for. Can you see that? It's probably heading for Didcot Power Station. Let's just see. There it goes. So it goes right there. Dogleg to the right, across the river. Does it go across the river? Or is there a substation there? No, it goes across here, across the river. And is there another one? No, sometimes they're not always easy to see on these images. There's a pylon there, see. So it's going eastward now. More pylons. You can see there's a bit of shadows, so that makes it easier. Let's find out where it's going. And we're here at this is a National Grid Cowley substation, right? So it's gone basically around the south of the city. So where's it? Oh, right. And there's more pylons going. Is that another pylon? Yeah, it's going down here now. So it's heading south. Over the top of there. I wouldn't want to live in these houses here. Where is that there? That's Newnham Courtney. No, I wouldn't want to live there. Is that one? I've lost them now. Where was it? Yeah, somewhere along here. Oh, it's easy to lose track of these things. It really is. There we are. There they are. There it is. There's a pylon there. South along here. Another one there. Another one there. Another one there. Must be thousands of these towers, these lattice towers. And sure, I mean, new ones. I've not seen new ones being built, but I have seen them being maintained. I've seen people climbing up them. And it's going south down here. Another one. Across the river again. And there it is there. Where does it go from there? Down here. Right. You need these every few hundred yards. You need these pylons. There's another one. Where's it going from there? I can't see where the wire goes from there. Maybe it goes along here. Yep, it does. It's hard because there's other roads and things there, make it more difficult to see. Where are we now? Oh, we're getting close to just Didcot, right. And there we go. Indeed, it's heading for Didcot Power Station, which is here, which I showed you before. I've shown you this on other videos. It is indeed heading for Didcot Power Station. So, see, these are the new gas-fired tower, the new gas-fired exhausts here. They've done away with the old big cooling towers when it used to be coal-fired. It's all gas-fired now because of my environment. Here's the I think these are the terminals for the pylons. So that actually does not. Maybe there are other examples that he could give, but I mean, he does actually state that. He does actually state in the video that the current power stations and the conventionally agreed on system of electricity delivery still exists. It's kind of like an auxiliary, though. It's auxiliary to the main purpose. So they make up the shortfall. Conventional generation makes up the shortfall. But anyway, let's carry on with this. Let's carry on with this video. Where is it? Here we go. It's not a very long video.
High tension lines is generating or harvesting electricity from the ether. So apart from the infrastructure itself, it's abundant, it's absolutely free, it's absolutely renewable.
And see, that's not how they made it look like Greek. It's not. That's a delta there. It's not. That's not Greek. It's just pretentious. That's a very pretentious kind of way of making it look cool like Greek. It's not.
Itself, it's abundant, it's absolutely free, it's absolutely renewable, absolutely sustainable, and as green as you could possibly get.
Yeah, I suppose it would.
All you have to do is run miles and miles of cable up in the air, out into the countryside, and back again. However, there is a catch. As your town or city expands its suburbs, they will inevitably encroach on the existing power lines. There are many, many stories and examples of construction companies having to build around and underneath these pylons. Doesn't it seem strange to you that rather than bury these cables under the new building project, they just leave them there? Now you have your answer. They can't. As the great cities expanded, the network was not enough to sustain the increased population, and other methods such as hydro, nuclear, coal, gas, and now wind are used to make up the shortfall. They can't take the cables down because they still generate a large portion of the UK's and most other countries' energy needs. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I present to you the national grid, not only transporting power to the masses, but also generating it through the ether, and it's been doing it for a very, very long time. For free, but you're still paying for it.
Yeah.
In the next video on this subject...
Well, that's interesting, that, isn't it? I must say, I find it hard to dispute what he's saying. I mean, I don't have the technical knowledge to dispute what he's actually saying. And of course, the idea that we're paying for something that's free, well, it's always the way, though, isn't it? That's what they make us do. They make us pay so they can control us. It's not just to make money, it is partly. It's so they can control us, as I've said in many, many times in my free energy videos. But this is similar to the jet fuel thing, except I must say it's more convincing, it's more persuasive than the jet fuel hoax. This pylon hoax, I suppose I should call it. But I suppose I would wonder why so many engineers and technicians could or would keep this bombshell secret. How many of them have to know? They have to pay electricity bills as well, don't they? I mean, aren't they going to complain? Well, wouldn't they complain? I would. So if any of you have any specialised knowledge on this subject, please do let me know. Now, I'm going to go into another example of this, which is actually far more credible because it involves military engineering, and which is by its very nature its very nature it involves hard secrecy. So this is a more I'm not saying the Pylon hoax is not credible, but this is even more so. Now this came up actually. I first heard about this from Miles Johnston. For those of you who listen to Panwo Radio, you'll know that he mentioned something that he'd heard from John Warner IV. This is very interesting, and he told me that nuclear reactors in naval nuclear reactors in submarines, these miniaturized ones they put in submarines, are not real. Which is very, very interesting indeed, and it's something that I used to be fascinated by. As you know, I had a massive career change like David Icke. So that's something David and I have in common. But I retained an interest in this sort of thing. Now, this is an interesting thing. The submarine, a submarine is a weapons platform in which stealth is its inherent property. It's designed to hide underwater, and the concept can be found in the ancient world. Alexander the Great was obsessed with the idea, but it's only in the last couple of centuries that the technology has been available to make practical designs of submarines. And they were used in the American Revolution, the Civil War. But it was when electric motors became in common use in the late 19th century that the first capable open water submarines were invented. And these had onboard generators to charge the motors, originally petrol, then with diesel engines, which allowed these craft to carry out long-range missions far out to sea. In both world wars, submarines were a devastating weapons platform. They were a hugely important ingredient in both the First and Second World Wars, on both sides, in terms of the German U-boats and indeed the Americans in the Pacific with their submarines as well. And of course, because they couldn't be seen, new acoustic detection systems were invented to deal with them. So submarines can't be seen, but they can be found by listening with underwater microphones, what they call hydrophones, or by analysing the echo of transmitted sound. This is called ASDIC, or active sonar. You know Brian Gerrish, if you're familiar with Brian Gerrish. He used to command a Royal Navy anti-submarine destroyer, and he described how his ships detected Soviet submarines, sometimes a long, long way away, 100 miles away, using hydrophones they placed in the water. Now, it's in a sense that the job of detecting and destroying submarines was easier, but originally because the submarine's motor batteries had a limited charge, and the only way they could recharge these batteries was by surfacing the vessel and running the generator at regular intervals. At least, and eventually they invented something called the snort mast, which meant that they could recharge the batteries from periscope depth by putting some pipes up above the surface to let air down into the submarine and release the exhaust. So they could. This sort of in the late World War II period, you had submarines with snort masts. But it's when in 1950s you got like the nuclear power. That's when it came along, and that gave submarines almost an unlimited underwater endurance. USS Nautilus, the first nuclear submarine, was built, and the Russians weren't far behind. They launched their first nuclear submarine a couple of years later, and suddenly the whole thing was transformed. But it was a trade-off, because nuclear power involves a lot of heavy machinery, and that makes noise. That noise can easily be detected by hydrophones, much more easy than an electric motor. And a lot of the subsequent engineering work in the sphere of nuclear submarine design since has been to make their reactors and power plants as quiet as possible. And now there's also now an alternative, which is air-independent propulsion, which is simpler, stealthier chemical propulsion systems, which have similar capabilities to nuclear power, but they don't rely on surface air, and they're a lot quieter than nuclear power. So that's kind of an example of what that's basically how the history of the whole thing began. But then something strange happened when Miles said, but actually that's not what they did. That's not what they did. Now, the first generation of nuclear submarines were built exclusively by the USA and Soviet Union. The American ones were supposedly much safer because they had a very harsh regime imposed by their inventor. That's Admiral Hyman Rickover, he designed these small compact nuclear reactors that were small enough to be placed in submarines. The Soviet ones were more dangerous. They didn't have, and a lot of sailors died of radioactive leaks. Lots of other accidents. Now, according to this interview, the American ones were not as safe as we've been told. And therefore, Rickover and his team made a decision in the early 1960s to abandon nuclear power altogether. Now, they couldn't just go back to a fleet of just diesel boats because they wouldn't be able to match the USSR at open ocean. A nuclear submarine, like I said, makes more noise, so it's not ideal for like cloak and dagger missions close to shores, inserting spies and special forces and things like that. But when it comes in open ocean combat, you can't beat a nuclear sub with a diesel boat. It's very difficult. So apparently they were given permission by the deep state to install free energy power plants in US Navy submarines on condition the fact was never revealed to the public. And official statements continue to lie that the Navy uses nuclear power safely. Now, is that feasible? Let's just listen to this. I'm just going to show you this interview now, which I actually did. This is John Warner IV. As you know, he's this guy who's now involved in the UFO movement. He's actually Chris Mellon's cousin. He's from an elite US family. His father, John Warner III, was like chief of naval operations. He was a senator for many years, things like that. There's a submarine named after him, which Warner's going to talk about. And funnily enough, despite the fact that they're cousins, Warner and Chris Mellon disagree enormously on the whole business of UFOs. But just have a listen to what he has to say. It's very interesting. Oh, what's happening? Oh,
believe that.
Oh, wow. Oh, sorry, I'll put display capture on. There's old Daniel List, apparently his name is, the dark journalist, and there is John Warner IV.
Oh, it's an excellent point. John, it's incredible. I can't let you get out of this interview without this one question, which we didn't put on the record before, but it has to do with you being on this trip
on the USS John Warner, and you speak to the captain,
and then you find out that they're using something else.
Yeah. No, I went to the inauguration for the ship, the launching at Newport News, and I'm sitting there, my hand on the hull. My nephew was there and everything, and the captain comes up and says,
"Let's just look this up. Actually, here we go. This is. I had a page open about the Nautilus here. That is the last Nautilus there, who's the first nuclear submarine in the world we know of. It's a museum now. You can go and visit it actually." But that is supposedly the reactor. Now, I should point out there's a duplicate reactor system for the Nautilus in a place called Arco, Idaho, at a nuclear laboratory, and that apparently is that adds, I think, to the idea that it's not actually possible to keep this sort of thing secret. That there is Hyman G. Rickover, the designer, there climbing down the ladder into the boat. But anyway, let's just go to USS John Warner. Oh, did I spell it right? USS John Warner, SSN 785, and this is it. This is the boat named after, and there's the crew there. I think this may be the inauguration. This may be the ceremony he's talking about. Inauguration. I think he means commissioning. And it is this is sailors man the rails as they bring their ship to life during the commissioning ceremony for the Virginia-class attack submarine USS John Warner at Naval Station Norfolk. John Warner was the 12th Virginia-class attack. Here we go. It should say a bit more here. Named after, she's the first of the class to be named after a person, named after John Warner. And it gives you a bit of details. The name was announced on the 8th of January 2009, 5 days after John Warner, a Republican Virginia retired. This is John Warner IV's father, John Warner III. And that's him there. He was the Chief of Naval Operations. He was a long-time senator. Died in May 2021. And you look at his personal life here. Children's 3. He had 3 children. So this is the father of the man being interviewed by Dark Journalist. And it says here, married banking heiress Catherine Conover Mellon, daughter of Paul Mellon. That's the connection. That's why he's a cousin of Christopher Mellon. Interesting that, isn't it? Anyway, let's go back to DJ and his talk with John Warner.
Nice to meet you. I said, hey, Cap, come on. I'll bet this underwater you can do 100 knots sustained. And I'll bet you that's not traditional nuclear power plant.
The U.S. Navy actually does never admits publicly what its own systems, its own assets are capable of. It's according to official stories, they say that since I think they publicised what Nautilus could do, or one of the early nuclear subs, they said it could make 24 knots in speed and dive to 400 feet. Now we know that there's absolutely no doubt that modern nuclear submarines are capable of almost twice that, both in terms of speed and depth. They can go down easily over 1,000 feet, and they can probably make sort of 40-something knots. Well, at least in the computer game I play, I don't know if you watch my gaming videos, the Seawolf class can make 40 knots. But 100 knots, now that's very... I don't know if it's possible for a submarine to go at that speed unless they have some like laminar flow system. I actually explored this in the Roswell trilogy, as you know, because the flying discs that were back engineered had the capable of going underwater at very, very high speeds. You see, high speed underwater. It's not just about power. It's about hydrodynamics. It's about things like that, which means that it's, even though the submarine may well be able to do 50 knots or something like that, 100, I doubt that. But anyway, I'm not an engineer, so we'll just go back to Mr. Warner and see what he has to say.
Plan in there. He just nodded and smiled, and I said, I bet you that's the truth. Don't worry, I won't tell anybody. Well, I didn't say that, but and he just smiled. He said, it was really nice to meet you, Mr. Warner. You're a very interesting person. And he shook my hand, slapped me on the back, and walked away. Now, to me, that's confirmation that they're using zero-point energy plasma. So it's a lot safer.
I don't know if it is actually. If that's the case, is that confirmation? Should he interpret that as confirmation, or maybe the captain was just having a laugh with him? I mean, he is the son of the man after whom the ship is named, so maybe he's just having a laugh with him.
For the traditional nuclear on submarines, I bet they started.
There we go. This is is this a photo he took here?
Started doing it in the early '60s, because I've heard that I met Admiral Rickover at the Naval Academy with my dad. I was probably 21, and I started talking with him about the first nuclear submarine, the USS Nautilus. And Rickover said, we were very naive about radiation back then. We learned that, from the Germans and other people who were messing around with their nuclear research. But it was a great idea, so we tried it. But every man aboard knew the dangers. So that was a volunteer crew, USS Nautilus. Now, they went under the ice, the North Pole, and it was a big deal. And they were all heroes in my book because they knew the dangers of the radiation. And everyone wore a radiation tag. And
wow.
The stories I've heard is that a lot of those guys into their older years are dying of cancer.
Oh, no.
So they went into it knowing it was dangerous. But man, at that time, Cold War and the Soviets, not on the UFO file, but on the up and up Cold War, fighting a Cold War, we had to do it. But I think the Soviets had the movies. There's some movies about it. The Soviets had a lot of reactor problems, and probably we did too. And someone said, enough. We got to put a plasma accelerator in here. It's a lot safer, a lot less radiation. I think there's a tiny bit.
Yeah, I mean, it would. I mean, technically speaking, a lot of these free energy systems, I know from, because I've studied some of the designs, would be ideal for a submarine. Not only do they not need air, so they could function just like a nuclear reactor does, or an air-independent propulsion submarine. They don't need outside air, but they wouldn't need the noisy machinery in terms of coolant pumps, condenser pipes, things like that. They wouldn't need that. They wouldn't need all these. They wouldn't need all these things that make a lot of noise. and make the submarine easier to detect. You see all the electric servo motors and things like that for the control rods and stuff like that. You wouldn't need any of those things, which would make them quieter, and of course the radiation risk as well. Nuclear fission gives off a huge amount of ionizing radiation. Yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it? And I'll let him carry on.
And they started probably doing that in the 60s.
Interesting.
And for safety reasons. And of course, the big carriers, you've got to go 35 knots into the wind to launch your aircraft. That takes a lot of power. Even in World War II, they could get it done with reciprocating diesel fuel oil engines, and turbines. But it takes a lot. And so nuclear power, they probably started out with traditional, but by the 60s and definitely by the 70s, every carrier carried probably a 0-point plasma accelerator.
That's interesting. Now, I don't think you have to go 35 knots into a headwind to launch aircraft. I think it depends on the speed of the wind, obviously, things like that. But I know that the carrier does have to turn into the wind to launch aircraft, because this was a problem in the Falklands War. The Argentines couldn't launch their aircraft because there was no wind. But it's interesting to know if, for example, the huge amount, the huge unprecedented carrier fleet, the unprecedented the aircraft carrier fleet of the U.S. Navy. There's nothing else like it in the world. Here we have U.S. Ronald Reagan. This is a Nimitz class powered attack of the U.S. Navy, lead ship of the class. I think it's been replaced now. There's new ones come out now. Let's have a look at the replacement. Planned replacement. The Gerald R. Ford class. This is the latest. This is the latest super carrier that the US has. Like I said, no other country has carriers of this size and that many. But if you look at its power generation, it has an A1B reactor. This is the new Bechtel A1B reactor of the Gerald R. Ford class. Is smaller and simpler, requires less crew, and yet more powerful than Nimitz A4W reactor. That's this one. A1B reactor. So they talk. This is, according to Warner, this is not real. This is not real, and that is Gerald R. Ford. Pre-commission, yeah. That's apparently the propulsion system they use. I'll let him carry on. Where is he? Here we go.
For energy, because it's like a small city. I was on the USS Enterprise, ironically enough, and I didn't get to see the engine room. My dad said that was classified. I said, well, I've studied nuclear engineering. I know what it looks like. You get the rods and the cooling pipes. I know what it looks like. He says, we can't go there. Ask anyone who's been on a Navy ship if they'll show you the engine room that's nuclear powered. Nope, unless you got a massive clearance. Now, my dad went and saw it. So I saw UFOs on the damn fantail with the crew.
Okay, so that's actually true. I'll show you an example of here. I found a book. This is a book I read years and years ago. You can see how old it is. It's Tom Clancy's Submarine. Now, Tom Clancy was a fictional author, but he wrote a couple of non-fiction books, and this was one about submarines. And he says here, the engine maneuvering, reactor maneuvering spaces. This is his. He does a tour of a submarine, and this is like his. You see here. If you wander aft from the enlisted mess, past the forward escape trunk and down half a deck, you'll find the Great Divide on Miami. That's the submarine, USS Miami. This is the entrance to the tunnel aft to the propulsion spaces containing the S6G nuclear reactor built by General Electric and the main engineering spaces. It is marked by a number of different warning signs, ranging from information on possible radiation hazards to security notices about just who on the boat is allowed aft of this point. It should be noted that no member of the media, including myself, has ever actually seen an actual nuclear submarine reactor compartment or her engineering spaces. And there's a picture of the door to the engine room, you see, which Tom Clancy took himself. You go in there, all the engineers go in there, but he's not allowed through there. He's not allowed to go into that space. Now, there's other reasons you say, well, why, Warner was saying, oh, well, I studied nuclear engineering, I know what it looks like, can't I just go in there and have a look? And they said, nope. But there could be another reason for that, and that could be that there's a classified element to that particular power plant and its systems and the propulsion system and the reactor. There is a classified element that goes beyond simply knowing how it works, and that is, as I've mentioned before, the quieting technology. This attempt to make a nuclear power plant as quiet as possible, to minimize the inevitable loud noise from the machinery. That could be a reason why members of the press are not in there. We know that, like, the Soviets actually used a lot of American technology on their submarines. They stole it. Spies like the Walker family, and they actually John Walker, the guy who led the Walker spy ring. He actually was nuclear trained. He was a nuclear engineer, and he did serve on submarines, and that's how I think he managed to get a lot of the secrets to the Soviets, and they built a class of new submarines which were incredibly quiet. But there's a lot of issues why this might not be the case. There's still a large number of people in the U.S. Navy, and indeed in the building works, the engineers who build them at the Electric Boat Company and other shipyards, who would know if they were putting in 0-point energy machines rather than nuclear reactors. A large number of people. For example, in the U.S. Navy, all submarine officers, regardless of their speciality, their position, have to be qualified in nuclear engineering. So even if they're like weapons officers or something like that, if they're going to serve in submarines and be commissioned in a commissioned rank, you have to be trained as a nuclear engineer, according to the regime Admiral Rickover dictated. And there's also just the issue of proliferation. It's not just, as I said, it's not just submarines, it's large surface combatants, also a nuclear powered, primarily, as I said, this unparalleled fleet. I think they've got about 18 of these huge supercarriers. And what's more, the US has shared the technology with Great Britain. The Royal Navy has been sailing submarines with nuclear power plants, supposedly, since the early 60s. Dreadnought, there was a submarine called Dreadnought, which was the first submarine. I think it was launched in 1962 or something. It was a British nuclear submarine with an American engineering. We know it was only after the Cold War we found out how successful spies had been in the various spies that the Soviet Union had in the West. I've done an entire video on that, Spies of London. Now the UK actually built its own nuclear power plants independently now. They're built at the Rolls-Royce factory in Derby. And I've talked about this on previous videos, or certainly on Hapanwo Voice, because the Trident replacement, the Dreadnought class, the new ballistic missile submarines the Royal Navy's building right now, the reactors are being constructed at the Derby plant by Rolls-Royce. That same plant is also constructing reactors for the new Australian Navy's nuclear submarines. That's part of the AUKUS deal. So all the people who are involved in that would also have to know that they're not really building a nuclear fission reactor. How compartmentalized could it be? That's the question. Now, funnily enough, just before I started filming this, I had a comment posted on reply to comment 67 by The Lights Were Low, and it's very interesting he brought this up, because this is kind of like ties in with why I'm doing this video. It's almost like he could read my mind. Hi Ben. Can you give your take on Miles's comments on the Hapanwo Radio 486, where he suggests the world's nuclear submarines aren't powered by such and haven't been since the 60s? Instead, he says a form of free energy that would allow an aircraft carrier-sized vehicle to move to the other side of the Earth for an instant. In an instant, apparently, they simply ask the crew to go below decks, and away they go. Admits even your reaction was slightly taken aback. Miles seems like a nice and very intelligent guy, but sees a conspiracy in everything, just saying. Yeah, well, The Lights Were Low, this was actually brought up in John Warner's interview with the Dark Journalist, but I'm not going to... I mean, I've already talked about the nuclear power issue for submarines and aircraft carriers. As for the the instant teleportation of ships. I'm not going to go into that right now. And to me, that sounds absurd. Off the top of my head, I don't have any evidence to say it's not true, but I can't think of any reason why it would be true. But that's beyond the scope of this particular video, unfortunately. And I'll come back to that when I do the next comments reply video, and I'll give you a more detailed reply then. How could such a huge deception involving so many people be maintained for so long? But John Warner IV, he's not an easy man to ignore. I mean, there's no, his profile doesn't fit with someone who normally comes out with radical information like that. People like me, in other words. John William Warner III was one of America's most significant military statesmen. He was Secretary of the Navy, long-sitting US Senator. And now his son is involved in the new ufology scene. Although, of course, he disagrees with Christopher Mellon an awful lot. But he does mention that they get together at parties and talk UFOs and things like that. Yeah. But if it's true, supposing it's true, because like I said, I can't dismiss this. With the pylons and with the nuclear submarines, I can't just dismiss it. I can't just say, well, that's not true. I don't have the knowledge to do so. Although I think you don't need expert knowledge to know that the jet fuel hoax couldn't be true. I think you would just simply to debunk this would be a bit more difficult. But if it's true, it'd be a good thing in a way, because it would make Disclosure Day a very different affair. Now, as you know, I mean, I've often thought that if I was writing the Roswell trilogy now, I would write it slightly differently. I would, as I said, the public reaction to Disclosure, I think, would be different than how I predicted it. I think most people actually would be pretty irrelevant, would not be interested. If they found out, UFOs exist, we've got the wreckage and bodies at Roswell and things like that. Most of the population, I think, would actually be pretty indifferent to it, and that surprised me when I worked that out. But it is actually true. There will be some people on one end of the spectrum, like myself, who would be delighted and excited, and on the other end of the spectrum, there'd be a small minority, who would basically freak out and go crazy. And as you know, in the Roswell trilogy, in this book, Roswell Rising, it's very, very different. In Roswell Rising, most people freak out. But if it's true what Warner's saying, then again, Disclosure Day would be different to how I described it. The introduction of the new technology would be far easier. The rollout could be much quicker, seeing as it's already been developed and it's already in covert use in such a widespread manner. You wouldn't need this big. You see, as you know, it takes from this book. In this book I describe what Disclosure Day would be like. It takes a long time for free energy systems to replace the existing systems. There's a long transitional period. But if what Warner's saying is true, that transitional period will be a lot shorter, because free energy is already so highly developed and already in such widespread use. And I think we mustn't let ourselves be, wowed and disarmed by Warner's status as a witness, because even very highly placed whistleblowers can be used for disinformation, and sometimes they can also talk complete nonsense, like I have to say, Philip Corso. So it's impossible to verify or debunk this right now, unless you happen to be a nuclear naval engineer, and that's very specialised. These nukes, as they call them, that is NUCS is how it's spelled, but it's pronounced nukes. Maritime nuclear power, very almost exclusively military. There's a few exceptions. There's icebreakers in Russia and things like that. They're bound by strict secrecy regulations when they're granted clearance to classified material. But of course, many more people are trained in electricity generation for public use, for civilian use on land. That is the people who maintain the pylons and the power stations. They're larger in number, and there's less secrecy associated with them, maybe none. So presumably, how would they keep the secret? How would that number of people keep the secret? it would be a bit difficult for them all to be involved, especially when I said they're paying electricity bills too, aren't they? Are they happy about that? Does it bother them? Anyway, this is I've got to thank Lisa for bringing this up, actually, because she was the one who made me aware of this. Lisa from the Cry Freedom show, and I have found it it's been quite an experience. It's been an interesting experience examining this. It really, really has. And I can't say right now it's not true. I can't. So yeah, and it's not as amusing as the jet fuel hoax, of course. Anyway, guys, thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. I'll be back very soon with another video. We're going to do the watch party for Silent Night. I'll do the review. I won't leave it too long for the review. Maybe just a few days because I want to get these things out of the way for Christmas. On December the 21st, there's going to be a Mayan Calendar 2012 10-year special live stream, so keep a lookout for that. So, and I've got some other ideas for videos too. Thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.